Welcome to the Kynective Media Podcast, and I'm your host, Jules Nadalin. Today I'm joined by Ruth Bastedo, digital strategist and an advocate for inclusive, accessible technology. Her work spans independent agencies, social impact organizations, and small business with a strong focus on keeping humans at the center of innovation. Welcome, Ruth. I'm so excited to have you on the Kynective Media Podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Jules. This is very exciting. I haven't done one of these before in this way, yeah.
This is great.
Yeah,
this is just great.
exciting.
This is going to be amazing. So I'm going to just jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, can you walk me through your personal journey and what led you to be human-first approach to digital strategies?
Well, I have been doing digital media and digital content for over 25 years now. And when I was in my 20s, I was an artsy kid. I wanted to do film, I wanted to do set design, I wanted to do theater design, all of that stuff. Realized that it was going to be tough making a living doing that. And a friend of mine suggested that I try to take all of that creative energy and put it into this new digital space. And I took myself off to the Vancouver Film School, and they had their first digital media program. And I pretty much never looked back. So I have been creating content and stories and every type of digital piece of content now for a really long time. And what has struck me over the years, particularly these last couple of years with the onset of AI, is there's some things that still do not change. Companies and individuals need to figure out their messaging, their story, their purpose, their mission, what they want to do, how to explain their product or their service to the wider audience. And it doesn't matter what technology you have in place, you have to have a vision of who you are and what you want to put out into the world in order to use these tools really effectively. And that is no different with AI, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
We're gonna be talking just a little bit about AI. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Thanks for sharing that. And I had no idea that's where your career started. That's such an amazing plot twist.
It is. And I actually find that now with these new tools, what it feels to me the most like is that late 90s period where like we forget that there was a world before the web and everything opened up and changed overnight and created all of these new opportunities. It's not that we've had social media apps, like mobile, like there are obviously things that have shifted and evolved over the years, but I think that this AI piece is the first giant paradigm shift in my career.
Absolutely.
That feels like those first early days.
Okay. I know we're going to talk about AI as a tool, so not as a replacement. So I'm just going to jump into that question. It sort of was down my list of things I wanted to ask you, but let's talk a little bit about it now since you sort of touched on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fear around AI replacing jobs and how you see AI best supporting human work instead. What's your feedback on like AI as a tool and not a replacement?
Well, it probably doesn't freak me out as much as a lot of people because when I was in my early 20s, there is no way that I could ever have predicted the type of work that I'm doing now because it didn't exist. It just didn't exist. Nobody knew what I was talking about with this web stuff or with, any of this digital thing. And the jobs that I have held, customer experience designer, or like these are not things that existed 20 years ago. And we forget that. So in my view and in my experience using these tools, yes, you save time, your work is enhanced, you can do different things, you have all of these new superpowers, but rest assured, it creates a whole other work stream and a whole other different kind of work that you didn't do before because they're wrong a lot of the time and they do things differently and it changes the cadence of how you work and it changes all kinds of dynamics in a team environment. So even though it is saving some type of work, it is creating all of these new things that you have to do and that your team has to do, whether it's monitoring, it's validating, making sure that the workflows are accurate, making sure that they are doing what you intend them to do, not to mention all of the other ramifications of speeding up the process of some of these things and moving quickly. So I think one of the things that we're struggling with in work cultures and as individuals is this shift in how we work. And, let's face it, human beings don't really like change that much. We're not super good at it. And so, it's daunting to figure out how not only you are going to change your workflow, but your whole team is going to change your workflow. And then, in addition to that, there are all of these other things that you need to have lined up in an organization for all of this stuff to work properly, whether it's having the data in the right place or, having everybody like having access to the actual tools or understanding what it is you're doing or not, freaking out about a million things that are in the press, all of that type of thing.
You were talking about office culture and community and colleagues and stuff like that. So one of my questions is, when we talk about women in the digital ecosystem, in tech-driven spaces, what's your experience been, and what are some of the gaps maybe?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I mean, I was just looking before our conversation at what some of the stats are. Like the fact is, in North American and Western countries, men and women are, almost at parity, not quite, but almost at parity in terms of how they use AI-based tools. And we're using AI-based tools in all different facets of our lives because it's baked into so many of the regular things. So if you search for something on Google, you're probably using that little AI addition at the top to replace how you searched things on Google a couple of years ago. So men and women are using it, at both at very strong rates. Where it gets a little different is in how we are architecting experiences using AI. And this has been a long time story in the technology industry. There just simply aren't as many women who are involved in building software and building experiences as there are women using the software and experiences. And, we've gotten around that in different ways. When we're building software or building websites, you have these design tools called personas, and you sort of imagine yourself like, what would a 25-year-old woman do when you do research and all of that. And those tools are still very much in use. But in my view, I think that this type of technology is so transformational that it's really important that women engage in it and actively try to make stuff with it and experiment with it and get in there and see how it can be used in life, from a woman's perspective, whether it's tools for everyday life or tools in the workplace, because men and women do, sometimes approach things differently. And if you've got a tool that is created by a group of people who are the same or have the same mindset, then it tends to orient it to favor them in that direction.
Yeah. That's a wonderful just lead into my next question. So thank you for just setting that up perfectly.
So welcome, Jules.
I think that this is something you're passionate about too, is diversity in AI development, why it's critical that diverse people are involved in how AI is designed and deployed. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and I have a very recent example that is top of mind. So my mother is 86 and she's very together and she does all of her own banking still and takes care of her affairs. But she's having these last few weeks a particularly difficult time getting into her bank. And they're all, they're in the process of tweaking different parts of the interface. They're adding a lot of security features, and a lot of these are probably because a lot of the AI technology is starting to bleed into a lot of these things. I can probably guarantee you that that design team is not thinking of what this banking experience is going to look like for an 86-year-old an
Absolutely.
86-year-old
Absolutely.
woman. So
Yeah.
the challenge that we have right now as a society, I think, is that these tools are becoming the infrastructure for our lives. Like, you need to be able to navigate them to get, government benefits, or to get your traffic ticket paid, or like all of these, sign up for a course, or like all of these different things that we know about from website design and all the rest of it. But they're all now accelerating because of AI. So again, if we don't see the perspectives of all of these different types of people reflected in how we are designing these experiences, we're really risking designing a world that works for an increasingly narrow group of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I can completely relate to that with having, parents in a different age category than myself, and the challenges with accessibility and having to step in to support them.
Yeah, and it's always been true. If you design for people who have accessibility issues, the fact is it makes it easier for everybody else.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
always it's
Absolutely.
always been the case, but it's really easy. The cycles of software releases and shipping product has really increased substantially over time. So those teams are under a lot of pressure to just deliver product and get something out the door, because these platforms are very competitive. So I'm not suggesting that people aren't trying, but it's very easy to not pay attention to to people who have a different viewpoint or a different set of experiences than your own, or everybody on your team. We all tend to think that the world is similar to our own life
Right.
experience.
Yeah. Where that is absolutely not the case. We all have our own journeys and experience. And talking about accessibility, let's talk a little bit about accessibility for small businesses, because we're talking about people, but I think that also is something that small businesses can feel overwhelmed with as well. And where can they realistically start?
So with small businesses, luckily there are like a lot of the tools that we have. So Shopify, for instance, or some of the new website development tools. A lot of those tools now have AI built into them. So I think you could do crazier things than just get to know the tools that you're already using better than you do now, and take that little bit of extra time to do the tutorials, or to read the how this works, and to play around with different features. And everybody's going to have a different a different set of tools that they already use. But when you put that little bit of time in, a lot of things that seem really daunting can, if you break them down, can seem a lot more accessible. And one of the great things for small businesses, I think, is that a lot of these tools are, relatively affordable at the lower tiers. And there is a lot of information out there on how to use them, like whether it's YouTube tutorials, or even using the AI LLMs to get actual instruction on how to do something. That's a great way to put the two together, like to use your main tool, say it's a Shopify site, but then going into the LLM to say, well, I want to set up, I don't know, a help chatbot, or I want to, figure out how to maximize my SEO, or I want to be able to make sure that my website is found by LLMs. Like, what are the 10 steps that I need to do in order to do that at a basic level? Like, really treat the LLMs as your assistants, or little experts who have access to more information than you do, and ask them sequential questions, and get them to essentially teach you how to do something. You hear a lot in the press that, we're going to have these giant businesses that are started by one person and are run by, two or three or four people. That is how that is happening, because those individuals are basically treating the LLMs and agents as they create those agents as little employees. And the tools are getting really, really good at this. It's just turning the system on its head a little bit and allowing yourself to be taught by the actual tools.
Okay. Again, embrace change, not fear.
Embrace, just dive in. Just dive in and
swim
give
the
it a
new
go.
waters. Give it a,
give it a go. This is very, like, the point we're at now, to very much a culture of experimentation, and all of the companies who want to sell you software as a small business owner, all of them are looking, like the big ones anyway, are looking at some kind of AI or agentic type of solution to help you. And my biggest piece of advice would be, don't ignore those. Like, dive in, and because who knows, they're going to start, at some point the cost structure for these things is going to change. So right now everybody's floating balloons to see what is going to work. And that is what that skill set, to be able to experiment and test and learn, that is what is going to differentiate the people who can adopt these tools and use them effectively to grow their businesses and run their businesses, from people who ignore them. You do not want to ignore them.
You want to embrace it.
You want to embrace them. And you may not find all of them useful, and that's okay. But you can certainly, like, we are at a moment in time where you can certainly expand your capabilities beyond our wildest dreams, like compared to a few years ago, if you put the time and the effort into going there.
And honestly, there's some AI that I use, and I'll do the foundational work and then use it as an assistant, and it's a time saver. It also gives me a different lens sometimes on things, and I was a little fearful going into it.
Good.
But now I'm like, no, this is working. This is okay.
The one thing I will say, though, if you do not know, like, what product do I want to sell next season, or what business do I want what direction do I want my business to go, or what is my strategy, or what is my plan, or what do I want to, like, you do have to put the time in ahead of time to put a plan together. And that is one thing I absolutely advocate. And there's something called a lean canvas out there, which is a plan on a page. I think it's it's a tool that was developed to support startups. It's a great tool for any small business. You could just Google lean canvas, and there are lots of different versions around. And being able to have something on paper or digitally in a document somewhere that outlines what you want, who you're going after, what your differentiation is, what your key messages are, like what you're selling, putting all of that stuff out there is really important, because the LLM isn't going to tell you that, and may lead you into a direction that is not helpful to you or even relate to what you want. So it's very much a garbage in, garbage out type of situation.
Okay.
And that's where the people part comes in. Like that,
right.
like, if
and
you're going to
always have the people,
you've got to have the people part. So putting the time in, if it's just yourself, like, get yourself a buddy, or, put an informal advisory group together, with something I did for years. I had a little group of women, and 10 years, we met every 6 weeks, and we advised each other on our careers and businesses. Like, make sure that you build into this process that people time where you are discussing your strategy, you're assessing your strategy, and you're figuring out what you want to do. And then you'll be in a much stronger position to use the tools to help you do it.
Yeah.
The tools
drive it.
Are not going to do that.
Right. No, that's the human factor. When we talk about digital social innovation, And you work closely with nonprofits. So how does digital strategy show up in a different space like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is a passion of mine. I've always, my entire career, done volunteer, not for profit work, mostly board work. And I currently am in my last stretch of a 6-year term as chair of Hospice Toronto, which is very, very rewarding. But all not-for-profits, like businesses, have to function in society and function within an ecosystem, and they are just as impacted by all of the same factors as businesses. So what I'm particularly interested in at the moment is how do we use this technology to move strategies forward in the not-for-profit sector. So at Hospice Toronto, one of the things that that we do is we support individuals who are end of life by training volunteers. And volunteers go and we coordinate, facilitate all of that. We have we have bereavement support services. We provide services for young carers. So we have a lot of ancillary services around that. But one of the things we're looking at is how is this new technology going to help scale what we do? How is it going to help deliver services more effectively? How is it going to help us address the needs that we see in our client communities? All of those things. So you're looking at, just like with a small business, you're looking at what is the strategy, but what is the use case, which is a word that you'll start hearing a lot in this situation. Like, what is the use case for this? And what are the requirements for what we need? And so by starting out having those very human discussions about what our needs are, what holes technology can plug, then you can start putting together a requirements piece and then go out and find technology to help plug that need. And then, figure out how to pay for it and, all of the things. But, not-for-profits in Canada are usually cash strapped, limited resources. And so there is huge potential for this type of technology to really help with a lot of the challenges.
Okay. You touched upon accessibility and cost. I know you're a strong advocate for inclusive AI and open source solutions. Why does that matter to you so much right now? I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, but let's expand on that.
Well, this is a general, AI is a general technology. It means it's going to impact everybody's life. And so whether it's young people or people starting out in their career or even older people who do not have a comfort level with this, who do not have access to it, who are not in a position to participate in learning how to use these tools, because let's face it, learning how to use the tools, it requires, ideally a subscription fee. It requires time. It requires a computer. It requires they're all of the things. It requires somebody to say, hey, you can do this, and a supportive environment around that. So those are all barriers to access, and that is going to cause, and already is, cause societal problems if we're only really looking at a smallish proportion of members of society who have access to it. So those are important questions I think we need to ask ourselves as a society. And I don't do a lot of work with youth and with young people, but I do think it's a giant challenge for schools and for parents or for communities to make sure that we are giving everybody who needs it the ability to participate.
and have access.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to inclusive, and specifically inclusive digital experiences, what does that actually mean in practice?
I think it means when you're like from a design perspective, when you're
Yeah.
designing something, you really try to keep a broad set of users in mind when you're creating the experience. So there are a lot of, I would say, design tools that we use, which are fairly, which are definitely getting zhuzhed up a little bit with AI, but we literally go through the process of mapping out how we call it a customer journey, how an individual was going to go through all of the phases of the experience, and then ideally, if there's the budget and the will, then we look at, okay, well, how is this going to be different for a 60-year-old or an 80-year-old or somebody who, doesn't have a high degree of sophistication with the subject matter, or is maybe has some other kind of disability. And that comes out a lot, particularly with government oriented projects. But you want to go through the experience of doing your best, like best efforts, certainly, but doing your best to make sure that the product is a stress test against some of those communities. And there are firms now that you can hire that will, go through testing for accessibility guidelines. You can certainly still do user testing. And what is evolving now with a lot of the AI-powered solutions is you can have AI-powered what we call personas. So these are representations, people that you can now actually have conversations with. So you put all of the research in. It's kind of cool. You put all the research in, and then you have their person, and then you have your customer journey, and you can literally say, oh, well, Sam, how would you react to this? Or what is your pain point here? What would your issue be here? And it's a little synthetic, but it does get you, it does get you a lot of the way there. And then, once you go into market, people will generally tell you where the issues are. But unfortunately, a lot of the time, budget has a lot to do with how much testing people do. So with certain types of organizations like banks or the government, that the universities, they will tend to put budget towards that because they have to. But for smaller companies and organizations or software companies that are a little more rogue, that doesn't always happen.
Absolutely. I have one more question.
Yes.
And I'm sure people out there listening are going to be like, are humans the next great disruptor of AI? What's the big picture question here? Do you think that humans may be the next disruptor, or what gives us optimism in the future in this world of AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you a story from my own
Please.
experience over the last couple years, coinciding with when I started using AI. I also, just sort of on a spur of the moment thing, decided to take a creative writing course. And I've now been through 3 sessions. So it's a small group of women. It's creative nonfiction. You write your thing. It's every week. You go in, you do a table read, and through this, I've created this body of work. And I think we, the more we engage in this technology, the more we are going to feel a very human need to express ourselves and to connect with other people in a very human, high-touch way. And if you look at some of the trends, I was in Amsterdam last year, and this is one of the places I know this is happening. Crafts were huge, like these digital detox zones, like a whole bunch of people would go into a church for a few hours and like bring their knitting and do yoga and hang out. And I look at my own kids who are in their early 20s, and they're not so enthused about some of this AI stuff. What they really like doing is playing Dungeons and Dragons with their friends, which is a very human, like both of my kids are totally, totally into it, which is a very human relationship, collaborative based thing. So I think right now we're at a point where we're all excited about all of this stuff. And we think it's, I'm not saying that it's not going to change things radically in the workplace, because I think the evidence is showing that it already is. However, the other side of that is I hope there will be a resurgence of, really recognizing the tasks that feed our soul and the activities that feed our soul, and writing, painting, crafts, doing miniatures, painting little models of things, like all of those things we're seeing a resurgence of, putting those little vignettes together, little puzzles, like all of those things, getting together with people. I think dinner parties are going to make a comeback.
Dinner parties are a thing for me. The monthly big dinner party. I love them. Yeah. But there's also, I can't remember which generation it is, where there's this huge trend, and I don't think it's Gen Z. It might be, or the one that came after that, where they're actually ditching their phones. They're like leaving and going out without them. Like it's circa 1980s for them. They're like, I'm leaving the house without my phone.
Exactly. And this fascination with the 1990s programming, Friends.
It's all coming back.
It's all coming because I think that there is this human desire to have that kind of connection. And look, the technology is changing way faster than we are. That is the big reality that we have to deal with. Workplaces have to deal with it. People in relationships have to deal with it. And so one of the solutions to this, I believe, is leaning into the things that make us human and spark joy. And it's, it's still, if you're having a difficult time in a work environment, or a group of people are having a difficult time coming to a decision about something, meeting in person and sorting it out in person is still hands down 10, 20, 100 times better than so asking your friggin' chatbot what to do about it.
and even like, I find even simple things like not going from text to like a phone call, just that human element. Like I'm trying to put more of that back into my personal life and my business life, where rather it being an email or a text message or that kind of communication, just actually having going back to in-person meetings, having real conversations. And as soon as you pick up that phone and make an actual phone call, it might scare the person on the other end when their phone rings.
Yes.
But you get so much more out of it.
Exactly.
And, that human connection is never going to be replaced by AI.
Exactly. Like I'm planning my spring, and I have it chocked full of in-person events, because I almost feel like, I just haven't done this for years. It feels like.
Yeah. I've got a lot of in-person business events in my calendar too, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I'm having a ball. Just talking to, because now we've all been in our little corners, figuring this stuff out, and now we have to come back and have conversations with each other. I just had a lunch where I just was meeting with somebody that I worked with who's very much in this space, and he was saying, I started writing too, which I thought was very interesting. So I think the human conversations, doing what you can in your personal, I appreciate I don't have little kids anymore. I appreciate it's hard to do when you have lots of other responsibilities, but a little bit goes a long way to reclaiming that part of yourself. And I think that the better a sense of self that we have, and a better a sense of our own humanity and our own relationships, the more effectively we're going to be able to use these tools. The danger is using these tools thoughtlessly because they're very powerful and we have no idea what's going to happen. And there's a lot of that going on right now.
Yeah. Brave new world.
Brave new world.
Ruth, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
If someone wants to engage with you in person or maybe in a digital space, how would they connect with you?
Well, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, or they can go to my website and send me a message, which is super easy. It's my name, ruthbastedo.com.
A big thank you today to Ruth for joining us and the amazing conversation about AI and being human first in the digital space. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe or share it with someone in your network. And remember, stay connected and keep telling the stories that matter.